Okay, welcome back to House Education on February 17. Moving into a committee discussion on sort of where we find ourselves with Act 73, advancements, changes, language that's been on the table to look at, maps that's been on the table to look at. So I'm just going to start off maybe with another sort of explanation as to what I have put on the table so far. The map I've explained was really, it's there to, what I put on the table is to sort of say, here's a package that answers some questions, perhaps prompts a few more, that responds to testimony that I feel maybe folks in here can understand at a minimum or get behind. That being, school districts as opposed to a mix of SUs and SDs, which I don't think is really feasible. 2,000 to 4,000 students in each. Trying to sort of do my best to kind of group things in a way that's culturally sensitive, but I definitely did not, bat it out of the park with that necessarily. But to sort of make it all in the sort of more reasonable realm than what has been previously discussed. And then the accompanying language is really there to say, okay, unless somebody has a better way of sort of addressing this, I don't see how you can have a world that is only school districts. And I fully understand that not everybody agrees that we should be all school districts. But if you're going to go that route, I frankly used what the governor had proposed in the original 454 to say, all need to be operating and school boards need to be in charge of where kids go to school. And that sort of parental choice as we have it today is incompatible with newer, larger districts that are school districts, not SUs. And so that's why it was written that way. So it was really just to put out there that if we're going to do this, this is, in my view, the way it needs to be done, barring any better suggestions or other suggestions, or compromise suggestions. So that's what's there. I think what we might start off with today is talk about things that we can agree on. And I think we've sort of, and what we might do to sort of put a bow on them to the extent that we can. I also would just like to remind us what we've done. We talk about sort of trying to make a more efficient sized school system for the state of Vermont. We've talked about class size minimums. We've talked about creating definitions for small by necessity. And then we've also talked about, and we have on the table that we already use, we have the excess spending threshold, which has been reinstituted. Senate is wrestling with spending caps. So there are other things that we've sort of taken action on or are looking at taking action on that are sort of outside the realm of the bigger changes. As I've said in my observation of our discussions, I think that the stuff that I have put on the table and other issues, that there's probably something that each one of us can't get beyond to say, wow, Peter, great idea, let's do it all. And so, that puts us at a little bit of a point where it's going to be hard to move forward on anything. But let's at least talk about BOCES, or CSAs. We probably have just a whole conversation about what we want to call them going forward. As well as school construction aid. So if we, I guess I would say when we talk about sort of agreeing that BOCES could be a positive step forward in addressing some of the costs in the state by increasing regionalization of services. If we were to take that and translate it into a proposal to be turned into a bill, what do people think that should look like? For example, I might say it should be voluntary, and I don't want to define districts. And I think that my solution would be fund an FTE at the agency whose job it is to spend 2 years getting superintendents together and making it happen. That's just an example. Other thoughts people want to. Beth.
So the testimony we heard nationally, so really there's 3 things that need to be in place. How's it funded? Is it that every district or supervisor union or whatever pays in? Is it in some states it's part of the ed fund? So you'd have to have something to discuss the funding mechanism, perhaps. The mandatory versus voluntary piece, which you did mention, and also the governance, whether we would prescribe that, because it's different in some states. Some it's full board members, some it's elected members. So those 3 areas would have to be sorted out, I think, in whatever bill.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful. Your thoughts on this?
I would need to know, to me, it almost still relies on how many districts we're gonna have. Because this it's gonna be a layer kind of on top of the district. To me, it's gotta be, those areas have to be much larger. So it has to be much fewer CSAs than districts in order for it to make it work.
I think we have some start. I'm trying to go back to the task force report because they actually did draw a map on this one.
They just use the existing 5
Superintendents,
regions.
which, as we are frequently reminded, are based around
Saying
restaurants.
and we weren't real strong on the lines being where the line are, but the number of 5 was taken from that.
And just my opinion, it'd have to be mandatory.
It would have to be mandatory.
That's what
I would second that.
That's fine.
All right, this is fascinating. Yep.
Even if the districts were mandatory? Because in my mind, I was thinking, if we make the districts mandatory, maybe the CSAs are voluntary.
I mean,
Thinking about who you could join with and
yeah. I mean, the only reason I was
who makes the
thinking
best partner.
mandatory is just the more the efficiency level of it. Have those big, larger CISA districts. Making it mandatory for everybody to join should translate to more efficiency.
Just want to speak to what you said originally, and this is not a pushback on that, but the current only one we have, it's SUs that are the entity that sign on. And, we haven't done the government exchange. And that one covers essentially 2 counties.
Well, I think
But it's SU, not.
if we're dealing with SUs, I was going along the line of
Yeah, I'm not.
SD model, right? SUs, I can see where it might be smaller because you're getting the kind of the consolidation and the efficiency of all those separate districts underneath. Right.
There's 14 of them, so that are part of it. But my point just being that in the current governance structure that we have today, we have one that essentially, single one that essentially covers two counties.
It might be worth reviewing. That one is voluntary.
It is,
It is funded by dues
it is, yeah, yes.
or paying for
By-
services.
Oh, like an à la carte menu of services,
Yes.
pay for service.
And its governance model is superintendents,
Correct.
the board of
Well, administrators.
directors,
Administrators.
administrators.
The boards aren't on their board. And we have an executive director.
Does it appear to be working?
Well, it's very
It's very-
early in, but everything I have had feedback on has been positive. I haven't heard anything negative, either caution or positive.
And I've checked around a little bit with superintendents who we haven't heard from down that area, and it probably would say, haven't taken advantage of it yet, looks very promising. Beth?
I thought, but just some clarification about the mandatory, not mandatory necessarily you join a specific one, but that you join one. Because you were saying maybe a partner might be better, what Kate was saying, it's like, oh, this would be a better partner than this would be a better. So I don't know if that,
I haven't really thought that.
Haven't thought that far.
Through, but
not mandatory, you
To me,
must join this particular CISA, but
to me,
be.
if you're gonna have areas, then you can join the area that you're in.
I think on the task force, we said, we know those lines.
What's partner mean? in that sense?
Well, if you've got two of them, like if you look at the BOCES map that's there, I'm a school district that's kind of on the border between those two. I might say, oh, it makes more sense for us to be part of this one, not part of this one, and be open to discussion, say, oh, yeah, well, we'll move that line of the CISA's some based on what we hear from communities. Would make more sense.
So mandatory,
Flexible, mandatory.
well, let's say mandatory folks, who's drawing the borders, who's drawing the CISAs?
So I played around with some coloring this weekend, and I am not like at a point where I'm like, I'm submitting this map yet, but like I was thinking about like tech center maps, and there's like 14 or 15 of them depending on how you do the borders, and of course these lines can be changed. Like I've said before, I can't really get past here with any real knowledge of what they should be. But I think that we could do something where we treated tech center CISAs as SUs, so these are SUs and they are mandatory. And within that, the voluntary incentivized districts, because if this was an SU or this was an SU, we do probably need less districts. That's a lot of budgets. It's, there are some schools that maybe should consolidate, but like those, I think should be local decisions, but this is kind of what I'm thinking about, is mandatory CISAs surrounding the tech centers, get down to like 15 SUs. And that be a governing body, that then we figure out a whole handful of things that the SU altogether is doing, bulk contracting, bulk purchasing. That's kind of what I was thinking.
So this goes back to, I think, Chris's point that if the new larger SUs that we created are going to do this, why would we even be talking about BOCES or CISAs?
Well, because that's where sort of the CISA, that's what the CISA districts would be. Well, I think you could use it sort of, come up with sort of an interchangeable thing, like the SUs are the BOCES.
Right, so I mean, I said that we would eliminate BOCES then,
Yes.
because.
Right, or it would make yes, I suppose so. Would make supervisories kind of, I see it more as making supervisory somewhat synonymous with those.
Right,
We break the current one up into four.
well, I guess I would say that, given what Leanne just said, we're just creating SUs.
Right.
It would take on the role of CISAs, but that's
Yeah.
the what is.
My
created
point
there.
though, there's one in place.
It seems,
Larger.
just at first blush, I'd say that those are probably too small for a CISA in that they,
Okay,
that the task force looked at,
I mean, this is just an initial stab of trying to get something on paper so that we can move on to some of the other things that we need to do, but like, I know that the people that I represent are very much in favor of not the mandated districts and moving to an SE model instead. So I don't want to go back to the governor's 5 SU. That did not go over well, but
I would also.
Yeah, we're just, we can tackle this in more detail when you're ready. But just for now, we're just kind of ironing out the BOCES kind of,
Yeah,
what we might want to do going forward.
I mean, in our original law, owning a lawyer friend, we have up to 7.
That's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel, yes.
Part
It's
of
a
me
limit, yeah.
would lean somewhat heavily on what we already debated, created and passed into law. But possibly we're taking it to the next level here.
So, student population does have an impact, I think, on size of BOCES. So the use of shared staffing is really important in a rural area, and that's why you could do it much bigger BOCES, whereas, areas where there's not as much of a need for that. You lose the benefit of that shared staffing. So the professional development is a real positive, working through professional development, but a lot of the special ed positions, there's a great area that can't, support that many staff. So sharing it over a broader area in the rural area is better. I can't see Chittenden County moving. Yeah, a huge swath.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, you want a certain,
To know what you know.
number of students involved.
Exactly. There you go.
If, if we want to talk about like smaller, did you say like 4 or 5 BOCES? Is that what you said?
Up to 7.
Up to 7.
7 is what the
So if we wanted to talk about a smaller amount of BOCES, I could also see something like this, I'm really pro SU, but I also want to move forward. I could see something like this or similar being school districts if there was a way to ensure that either those school districts were not gonna start making mandatory decisions for communities that don't want those decisions. Like if we could adopt something like Representative Olson's bill that said towns still had input or, a place on local boards.
Which could be on a BOCES board.
Which could, yeah, sure.
Just to bring us back to what Beth Quimby originally said is we need to talk about, if we're going to talk, can you talk about BOCES, about how we might fund them, mandatory versus voluntary, and what their governance should be.
I have opinions on the government.
Lay it on us.
Well, remember, this is still really new for MIAS. We only signed on in December or something. So this is pretty new, but the feedback that I've been getting, I don't see any need for a school board member to be part of that board. I think it needs to be administrative. This is what they're talking about, what they're dealing with is what our administration does, just on a much larger scale. And so there's been no request from MISU or anybody that I know of to have board member representation, because it isn't, we do boards do much higher level policy work, not the on the ground professional development and staffing levels and all that. Of course, boards have to oversee, what's going on in the BOCES, but as far as governance, I see the need for administrative. The money gets approved by the boards anyway.
Just looking back to the testimony, another key consideration is there needs to be a way for accountability to be tracked for the CISAs.
Yeah.
As well. I forgot that one.
It's important.
Yep. Governance, funding, accountability,
Process.
voluntary.
Makes total sense.
I got a question about.
Process.
Yeah.
What do we need to decide about the funding? Is it regardless, is it how the money travels there? Is it like based on student count? Is it based on, is that what we're looking at? Because.
I can tell you what's in my notes.
Please.
Nationwide, some of them are direct appropriations and are state funded. It's just a direct appropriation in the budget. Some states.
All right.
She didn't say which ones, but other states fund them directly as a direct appropriation. Some do the most common or more common now than when this all first started back in the 1950s is fee for service. Most places now, most states have a blended approach of some appropriation and some fee for service. Only Michigan has a CISA model that the CISA itself has taxing authority for its funds. That's only in Michigan. So most states, it's a blend of an appropriation and then the school districts, SU's paying a fee for service on top of that.
Or I suspect part of the blend might be every school district puts in $50,000 and then there's fee. for
Then
service.
fee for
Based
service on
on
top of it, right?
Student population, I
Yeah.
believe.
So there's various models.
At least to get started, because then you might have to, then you can probably winnow it down to just fee for service.
Yeah.
Yes,
I would
please.
argue for absolutely mandatory or not elected boards, but administrators from the member schools or districts. I think my picture of this all along has been eventually kind of a fee for service, member organization. And I know we're starting mentally, I'm not sure if it's realistic, kicking around the idea of, what if some of the buy down is used instead for school construction? Could you actually take a teeny tiny amount of the buy down? I don't know what it would be for the sort of startup and actually like, if this is, one of the most quick ways to start to lower costs in pool services. Use, what is it gonna take, $1 million, less than that, like to start them? And get so that they are funded and ready to start operationalizing.
You do have 10,000
Right away. Is that
You do have a $10,000 appropriation for when one's born.
right now? Yes.
Switch that to the
Help,
Yes,
help
but
with
if it-
the
yeah.
process.
start getting.
Could do the articles.
But if you needed, say, before when we had talked in a prior ed committee a lot about how many, not saying we landed in the right place, but it was about 7 after we did a lot of gnashing our teeth over maps. But say you needed 7, if $50,000 or less per one would get you somewhere. That's a tiny investment for a potential faster payoff. And just accelerating some of this work.
So, I think that if we're going to talk about mandatory, and that means that the burden falls on us to define lots of stuff. Like, how many board members? What does each area, what school districts does each area include? How is it funded? What the governance is going to be?
Or perhaps then what I was just talking about is maybe that's the incentive for voluntary, but there's a little bit of startup money, a little more than the 10. And I do also wonder, going back to the task force report and a lot of discussion of districts of 500 or less, which is a lot of our districts, and that those are the places most where you can start to capture some efficiencies much more quickly if there is some metric of extra incentive, a little bit of requirement, but
I mean, we can't, I don't know how long it would take to create 7 BOCES, 6, because the one's already created. So a 5-year, a 2-year.
I would certainly hope it's a lot less than a 5-year. I mean, I think the last one was a 2-year one, but there was quite a bit of, it took quite a while on some of the
They would tell you-
administrative parts through.
So they've been sort of laying the groundwork for this, I think, I heard something.
Right?
But that was.
They were cooperative.
Exactly, they've been a cooperative for a while, so that, but, wasn't, we now know a ton more.
I guess I'm more comfortable with a more accelerated timeline here because, like, zooming up, I do think we had challenges. I think we disagree around the table around what the most important first steps are, but if this is a far more strategic and gentler approach than mandated districts, the trade-off in the field might be, yeah, this is a 5 to 7 year on-ramp. This is a 1 to 2 year.
I agree. Councilman Larry?
Uh, okay. So question began, so now what on that? Just, we can, for the moment, we can think about it. But I again would say, there are still decisions to be made. If it's going to be voluntary, which I heard Representative Brady evolving toward, if we
I
can
can
provide
be- I
a
can be
carrot
with this,
approach for going to a stick, I would imagine. So we could say that the state is going to provide, whatever the number is, $50,000 grant funding to, provide seed money for BOCES. My question is, we are still proposing something that it's up to a group of people who are already very busy to get together and do. And so how do we make that happen? Other than just saying, here's the potential for a $50,000 grant to make it happen.
Right now, back to management. You just convinced me.
Or-
But I think the task
or-
force said mandatory.
Or you have somebody whose job it
Yeah.
is to go out and get people together.
Well, that was gonna be my question. I mean, in other states, I'm assuming there's probably some person embedded at the Agency of Education who would be helping to manage some of these things.
I don't know the answer to that. I think, I mean, we know that it's,
Some it's an arm of the AOE and some it isn't.
exactly, some states it is.
Some it's an independent.
Some places have county government, there's just, it's gotta be the Vermont.
Right.
Vermont way.
There is something to be said about a system like this, being very collaborative, which lends itself toward some voluntary mechanism, I think. You want buy-in, you want everyone to get it and understand what the benefits are.
It would be, one thing I don't think we really asked about with the BOCES that does exist is the accountability portion of it. I'd be interested to know that. All right, well,
Actually, I'd be interested in knowing, the funding mechanism and, as they've gone, I mean, every day there's new things going on. It's really only just formed, but
in the current BOCES.
yes, yeah. It might help.
Is that something you could, rather than bringing in testimony, is that something you could follow up on and just sort of say, what is the funding model down there? I assume that
Yeah, I can only speak to what we did.
like, do you pay per student? Do you pay per? Is it strictly fee for service, that sort of thing?
It's a mix.
Yeah.
It's not. I just don't even know how many SUs in that region didn't. I don't know anything about that.
So listen, I know that, BOCES is not moving the big part forward, but I wanted us to talk about something that we could talk about that we could get some agreement on. And I think we also have agreement on school construction aid. We are going to have a couple of superintendents come in and talk about that. Again, remind us of the importance of it, perhaps even talk about numbers. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, you were just on a roll. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just
Anytime somebody else wants to talk, it's great with me.
heard. Yeah, before I get into a coughing fit here, I was just thinking about what the superintendent said the other day. How they hemmed and hawed a little bit when they were pressed in terms of, new districts and simultaneously, BOCES or seesaws, which, maybe that sentiment just needs to come into the equation as we're thinking about voluntary or forced kind of things. But just wanted to throw that out there as I was thinking about it.
Yep, I think that's a very good reminder that we can't do everything all at once.
Right.
So school construction aid, I'm just simply going to assume that everybody in this room supports the fact that we need school construction aid. What I don't know is what people think about how much and where does the money come from? And is that something we want to tie into a larger bill? What's kind of nice is that we have been talking about it for way too many years. And we have in the meantime created an infrastructure. We just haven't funded it. So I'll put it right out there. Do we want to talk about trying to claim some of the buy down for school construction as a way to seed the program finally, or not? But if yes, how much? And what are the next steps?
So if we seed it, where do we go from there? I guess is the question. How do we accumulate more money after we've got a little chunk start?
Yes, absolutely. That's the biggest issue because the model that we're looking at obligates the state to pay annually toward construction projects.
So it's a mandate. So someone's got to figure out where it's going to come from and how much.
That's right.
It's not up to this committee.
Well, so the testimony that we have heard on this is that once the sort of annual obligation of the state is determined, and the idea is that that a municipality would take out a bond, and then depending on the criteria, the state might fund anywhere from, say, 10% of the annual payment back of the bond to 50% of it. That's a 20 to 30 year obligation on the state's part. So a one-time infusion of $20 million gets the ball rolling, kind of finally makes it a reality, but that obligation, as we have heard from some folks in JFO, should be an appropriation that is in the budget.
Right.
Period. Now, the question is, does it come out of the ed fund? Because then we're not really doing anything except socializing the cost of construction projects over everybody as opposed to it coming out of the general fund. Yes.
So it's never going to be a fully funded amount of money per district. It's going to be a subsidy and assistance. We take out a bond to build a new school. You'll help, but we still have an obligation.
Correct. Yes. And the way it is set up is that that money would be probably awarded on a point system, the percentage that you would get based on to the level to which it sort of meets the goals of the state. So if our goal is newer and fewer, and you're saying we're going to just fix our own high school and not make an attempt to make a regional high school, you might get 20%. But if you are looking at saying, we're going to add on to U32 so we can accommodate every school that surrounds us, that would be meeting the goals of the state and it might get a 50% contribution.
And that is what the last program. You got 30%, but if you merge, you got 50%.
On a somewhat related topic, might be throwing a monkey wrench in here, because we did have presented to us bill from Rep. Kimball regarding construction and bonding and the excess spending threshold. And that's not, I was gonna say, that's really a ways and means issue.
That's where
not-
it is.
and it's-
I moved it last week.
Yeah, it's not our purview to weigh in on that, but I thought I'd bring it up as long as we were talking about school.
Yep. Yep.
If there's something out there in the works. regarding-
One question. We can't do a bond as a state. We don't do state bonding, is that?
The bonding capacity of the state is, could not absorb the need of school construction. So in other words,
Oh, I
that
know
was the
not all of
old.
it, but like a one-time state bond for school construction.
I think the answer is no. That is how Rhode Island seeded its program, is they floated an initially large bond.
Yeah, that was my thinking related to.
Thank you. You reminded me there is, in some states, according to some people I've talked to, they actually use, treasury dollars as investing in public infrastructure, with the payback being part of a small amount. Anyway.
And it's not a bond.
Yeah.
There's a bond bill, actually, it's part of the regular legislative.
Right. Yeah. And we do it much more on a local level in Vermont. It's all done through the municipal bond.
Municipal bond.
We've really moved to, as they keep calling it, a pay-go system at the state level. All right, well, since I'm only hearing silence at this point, Leanne, why don't you talk a little bit more about what you got in front of you?
I mean, this is just me thinking.
That's fine.
Grants. To be clear about that, I'm taking grants, I'm not proposing anything. But I mean, I guess I was just thinking that, there's been so much that we thought we put into our tech centers, and I understand that everyone's getting really hung up on SUSD question. To me, that is a really secondary to some other really more important questions. So I kind of wrote these out as SUs, because that's the feeling that I'm hearing from my district. But I also could see them being SDs if there was a safety mechanism in place that people weren't trying to eat each other's. And I think that, I don't know what to say about it. Like, what questions do you have that you want me to speak more about?
Oh, I just curious. So this is it based on the task force original CTE map?
Yeah, although I wasn't looking at that. I was really just looking at a list of the tech centers, and probably the lines would need to be adjusted by people that live closer to those. They may be wrong on this.
How many do you have?
Where do you go? So yours, you mentioned tech centers, it's centered around just the tech centers, not a future state of regional high schools.
Well,
slash.
that's the other thing I was thinking, is that this does not preclude the idea of regional high schools and all of sort of the state construction that could go in that and be incentivized. I think that there probably are a lot of places, and maybe a place for one or two more tech centers, because some of these are getting kind of big. But that we could continue to have regional high schools, like maybe, I think there's 17 on here right now.
17.
17 colors, 17
Got it. Oh.
districts, SUs, however you went. 17 little separate boxes.
Yep.
I think there could be regional high schools, probably not as few as 17, because I know of at least some communities that don't want just one regional high school. They want to continue to fight for their schools. But I think that, if there were sort of guidelines in place, like in the foundation formula could still apply to this. If you can make your school work within the foundation formula and you're meeting the standards the quality standards that we're setting for high schools, minus maybe the minimum class sizes, regardless of your size, you have a chance to try and keep going. And this could exist within here, but with one government structure for each of these colors. And I think that we can, well, I guess two, because there would still be the districts if we wanted to make these SUs. I could maybe be sold on that being districts, but maybe not.
So actually, I'm just from a public records point of view, but probably should hold off discussing that specific map until we're ready to
Right.
submit it and post it and all of that.
That's why I said I'm
But-
thinking with crayons.
Yeah, but that's fine. But here's a discussion I think we should have right now,
Yeah.
because we are using a lot of terms interchangeably.
There are.
What do we mean by regional high school? And anybody can start right off. Thank you, Kate, you're
I would
first.
think it would be a high school in which the kids that live in the region go to, that would include some access, maybe not full access, but some access to CTE curriculum. I'm kind of thinking about the regional high school that I went to in Whitefield, New Hampshire, where you could take AP calculus and then you could go outside and do maple sugaring. Or you could go into the garage and learn how to change the oil or whatever. Like, I want kids to be able to do a wide variety. I don't want them to have to necessarily make a choice and go off to another school. And then that's the choice that they've made. So that's what I'm thinking when I say a comprehensive regional high school.
All right, well, so comprehensive is it's actually in statute.
I know, but.
But we keep using, I just want to get some common understanding of regional high school. Like, does it mean an existing high school? Because if we're going to talk only about brand new high schools, we need to ratchet down our expectations, because at $190 million a pop,
I think it could mean what you had mentioned earlier, U32 adding on to
Limitations to existing structures.
do we,
whatever it needs to include.
how about a number? Right, is this not number of schools, but number of kids in a regional high school? Anyway, I'm not gonna stop talking.
Well, in Governor Baker's
Yeah.
report that previously, that's, many years old now, that he talks about evidence that moderately sized schools, and at the high school level, he calls that 600 to 900, may optimally balance economies of size with potential negative effects of larger schools and consolidation. So that's a very rough benchmark. There's something that came from somewhere.
England.
I think of regional, it has to be a geographical accessible region. I think one of the primary things, and it would involve everything that you indicated.
We can't put a mountain in the way that doesn't open the pass during the winter. And
So if we were to use my map, and Addison County basically becomes a district, and we've got 3 high schools there. In that case, what is meant by regional high school? And what if the one that we think is the regional high school, because it's got the CTE attached to it, isn't geographically convenient to everybody within that district?
I would go back to the idea that you could have satellite pieces. I think the tech center that we have over in Barry, it's already exceeding its capacity. So if they got to stay in that space and we took some of those kids so that they could expand, they still might not have enough space. So let's say they still need another automotive and another HVAC. Those 2 programs are built at U32. That still makes U32 a regional high school.
I don't think we can duplicate all programs in all schools, but I think all regional high schools should have access to career and tech curriculum program. Because there's many things that don't actually require more than a classroom along with some investment in whatever.
A lot of
program
them,
is.
it's one of them.
Right, that's one of them.
I think we pretty much all agree on that, having that CTE.
But it is why I stay away from the comprehensive high school, because it is.
As opposed to regional.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I'm still not sure how middle schools fit into this, but I think middle schools could fit into this, and maybe not in every regional high school, but it could be regional high schools, regional middle high schools. It could be both. I mean, in rural regions, you may need to have / middle high school
And you may need the middle school to hit the
numbers.
numbers.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get opportunities in front of kids. It's my goal.
I also want to weigh in on what we mean when we talk about regional high schools. Because I think, the task force report said we should incentivize the creation of regional high schools. The challenge with that is, who gets to be the regional high school? Or are you just saying, we're going to empty out these buildings and we're going to build a brand new facility, which is probably beyond our capacity as a state.
Well, then I will add on to, since you brought it up, I'll add on to that I want to make sure that we don't create in the process of creating regional high schools, however that happens, that we don't create public school districts.
Or that could be, and then you.
When we say that, it's beyond our capacity as a state, I guess one of my questions is, does everything have to be sort of the same? Because it seems like there are some parts of the state that have really adequate or more than adequate facilities right now that could service some of those regional high schools. And there are some parts of our state that just have nothing that could service that. And so we don't need to build a new high school in every region. There are some that have them.
Correct.
But this wouldn't really work in my region without a new high school or two. We don't have what U32 has or what Chittenden County has. So I don't think it needs to be uniform for fairness. If something like that's equality, not equity.
Yes, but I think if our goal is to increase access to regional high schools, we could Hazen be a regional high school with a significant investment of money?
I think it would need an entirely new building. Have you been to Hazen? I mean, no offense to Hazen, but it's a different planet, not just a different ballpark.
It's used up. The building is used up. Yeah.
Well, outside up north region, PCBs. Resulting in perhaps the whole demolition and rebuild of at least a major wing of a school in my region.
Bring it on home.
All right, well, this isn't going to, I know that we are rushed and we're feeling a lot of different pressures. And for some of us, some of the decisions last year were perhaps rushed. But now, given all the work we've done in the legislature, all the tools on the district builder and the drive time and all of that, all the work the redistricting task force has unearthed, what the commission continued to go through, we have a lot more information and to an extent engagement. It's absolutely not uniform at our fingertips. And so it just seems it doesn't seem unreasonable that we could have a couple actual look at the real schools, the real kids, the real drive times, the real FCIs, and plot out a couple scenarios of what the future state of the actual high schools might look like. And I'm not quite sure how to get from here to there. If it's just a matter of us doing it ourselves, I get nervous about that because I feel like I only know certain regions well. But it just seems like that instead of this sort of theoretical, and I think the task force was starting to get there, and they did it pretty intensively in a couple regions, but to take the whole state, all that, and start there. Doesn't feel unrealistic, and it also feels like perhaps a more kind of logical starting point to go backwards from. Because what I will also add to totally complicate and annoy everyone is that I am very worried how much we are obsessing over maps. And I totally understand why, but you can see things super clearly on a map. You can see lines, you can see towns. There's two major pieces to this transformation, and the foundation formula is a huge policy change. And it's not as clear. It's, multi-years of process. It's lots of spreadsheets. It's things that are not on one paper for us to easily see. and may have even more dramatic impacts in lots of different ways on the future of education. And so I am concerned, like as Leanne talks through things there, that increasingly my first question is, and what about the foundation form? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Because I think if we just keep looking at the maps in isolation without a concurrent conversation about the foundation formula, what assumptions have already been made, what assumptions could be made, and what that will mean. Because if right now these two go together, and so if there's a map, then there's a foundation formula. And so, and one happens before the other, but some of the things that people might feel strongly about in a map actually might be more impacted. The decisions they might have to make might be far more impacted by the foundation formula in terms of what stays open, what stays closed, how many teachers, what opportunities, what programs. So that's secondary to my dream that we could actually create a real high school map, I think. I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm not sure who or how, but it just seems we've got lots of stuff here. It seems possible. But then the second is my like really existential concern about where we are in this two parts, and we're only looking at one part, and yet it's a two-part mega change.
I would remind us that even the governor has been very clear that, and it's always been this way from the beginning, that foundation funding doesn't happen without governance change. The
Right.
governance change has to come first. So as much as we have I don't want to call it framework, because it's a lot of work has gone into this foundation formula, but it feels like, part we need to work on is governance first.
Yes, please.
Well, I was just gonna say, yeah, just to add on to that, I think, maybe I'm speaking just for myself, but I think I'm speaking for more than that. I think we just need to be really clear about what our governance decisions, if we get there, sort of trigger down the road. And I'm not sure that we're all operating with a common understanding of what the governance decisions mean, for the issues that Rep. Brady just highlighted for us.
Representative Emmett said, you're kind of stuck, just sit there in silence, wait till somebody talks.
Is that a strategy?
It doesn't work in this committee.
All right. So we can talk about regional high schools. Mandatory, voluntary. If it's voluntary and it doesn't happen, then what?
I guess that's where, and it's a lot more than that, but that's where I think having the conversation isolated from the foundation formula is hard, because actually there's a very strong connection between and then what, because we are constraining education spending and we are controlling it at the state level. And so the choices people will have about and what may become more stark in different ways. And so you can keep your small school, sure, at what cost? And then if the foundation formula is pretty tight, what do you do then? Or you have your opportunities that you want to maintain, but the foundation formula is pretty tight. You don't have a lot of wiggle room, then what do you do?
I mean, you can almost work that argument, that conversation down to, are we spending too much on education?
Right.
Yeah, sure can.
Voluntary with a lot of incentives can go a long way. What those incentives are, I don't know, but it makes voluntary much more useful.
Leland says voluntary and lots of government tax dollars to.
Yeah. That's gonna go a long way.
Yeah,
I guess I just have a lot of faith in Vermonters and in small towns that if these regional high schools existed, that a lot of schools would, a lot of families, a lot of students, a lot of towns would in fact choose them. I feel like when we're talking about voluntary versus mandatory, there's this assumption that if we don't make it mandatory, people won't choose them.
but you have a chicken and egg thing. Do you invest $100 million in U32, not knowing if people will come?
Right, but that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make, is I think that they will, and for those, that it was really important, like, is there a way, I guess it would be through districts, I'm thinking about this out loud, which is maybe a risky thing to do. But is there a way that like students could choose in their tiny high school to still go to the regional, and then the problem will take care of itself. They'll either, families will either choose to support their small high school, or they will move to the regional high school, and then the question has been answered.
If there is high school choice. You have to be able to offer them that choice.
Right.
Yeah, I'm always concerned, or I have been even when I was on the task force, of not looking at it all statewide when it's all voluntary, because I worry about the left out. The piecemeal part of it, the deserts that get formed, because nobody takes them in, and you get an increase in inequities rather than a coming together. So I worry about that also, and I think that's part of what happened the last time we tried this, is it happened, but not on a large enough scale statewide, in a coordinated way statewide. Because you can see regions where it really worked well, and regions of the state that have just been devastated.
All right. Let's, anything else before I say we'll adjourn for the day?
I would say that the thing that really, one piece, there's many things that have me stuck. But one piece that has me really stuck is that I feel like, Vermonters, at least, I don't know if your guys' inboxes are filling up at the rate that mine are. But I feel like Vermonters in my region have really spoken that they want a chance to hang on to their schools and make their communities survive with those schools. Maybe that doesn't preclude like a regional school, high school, middle school, the elementary schools definitely, I feel like they are trying to hang on to it. To me, like, I feel committed to listening to what they want. I feel like that was the position I was hired for, so I don't know. I don't know what my point is.
That's a totally solid point.
I would say it's gonna take a while to get these regional high schools built. And maybe your region doesn't start with one because they don't want one.
Right, maybe they.
And
see
they
what it
wait and
looks
see
like.
what happens.
Yeah.
We have a fundamental issue in the state on how we do our education funding. And while everybody may want what they have, some of what they have costs the rest of us a significant amount of money. And that's one of the challenges. And
Change is very difficult for many people. They don't want to change, but it has to.
yeah.
Well, I would touch back on that though, because we keep saying that change is difficult for people and it's nostalgia that keeps them wanting to have their schools open. And I just don't think that that's the entire answer. It is also wanting to see those regions survive for generations to come. And as we shut down schools and make them nothing more than a postcard for the rest of Vermont to say, hey, this exists, then those regions will not survive. And so that's what we're trying to protect, is not lack of change, but a chance for a future that has community.
I might push back and say if they want those schools to exist, they should think about big C, big S community schools at the elementary level. And try to save those schools that way.
I mean, that's what
Like,
they're doing.
When,
which I think is great. Like we saw this in Washington Central. I keep talking about it. Doty had an opportunity to put a daycare out there, much needed out in that area, and they chose not to do it. And now if we go forward with all of this, they're likely gonna have their school shut down. And that's a choice that community made. So every community's got a choice. They gotta figure out where they wanna go.
Yep.
But I think I think we often talk about this redistricting stuff as closing schools, closing schools, closing schools. I don't think it has to be that way. I
think-
just don't think it has to be that way.
I hope you're right, and I think it would be way easier for some parts of our state to move forward if we had a few more assurances and it's not going to be that way. Because right now, it feels like asking people to sign up for their own execution. And so if that's not really what we're talking about, then like we should be clear about that.
The foundation formula is going to constrain spending, so there's growth and losses, and this, that, you know, I think we're all feeling that in different ways, but that is again why I'm raising that point, but this is two-part package. They're both huge, and they're both going to have implications. It is not just district boundaries.
Right, we have a bill on the wall that says just implement the foundation formula and get rid of class size minimums and other things, and just let everybody manage the money in their own way.
I mean, how do we even do that when there are still so many pieces of the foundation formula to be like TBD, like to be determined? So it's like, I don't even know how I wrap my head around a bill like that.
Right, well, it definitely would be, and that is one of the major challenges with us wanting to be able to connect the foundation formula to any map work we do right now, is because CTE hasn't been figured out. Pre-K hasn't been figured out. What's the other big one?
Special ed.
Special ed hasn't been figured out.
Transportation, categorically.
There's a big study due back at the end of this year. So, we are challenged. We are challenged, period. We're definitely challenged by wanting to take a step forward, and we want 100% of the information so we know exactly what we're doing. But we can't get 100% of the information until we make a decision on what we're doing. And we're going to just keep grinding over this. I'm not sure how we have many a stumbling block. As I keep saying, every one of us has got our stumbling block here, whether it's sort of preservation of local control or needing to know the foundation formula or whatever it might be. The alternative, what we need to know is what are the alternatives to the status quo that people can get behind.
I have to take off.
We're going to adjourn right now on that, Leland. Thank you.